building a roster in the system can be done in a few ways. First and foremost, the old-fashioned way, which is the drag and drop system. So we have our available shifts at the top here, which you can see if you click show vacancies. If I just click it to hide and click it once more for it to appear, I've selected my registered nurse shifts, which show me all my available shifts to roster or that require rostering for this period, and I can quite literally pick up an early on the Monday the 24th just by clicking it and dragging it into place. So I'm just going to drag it out to one of my RNs and just pop it on the roster. That now goes green because it's fulfilled, and the number where it says early times 3 now says early times 2, as I've only got two shifts left to roster. And I can just continue doing this until I run out. And all the earlies for that Monday are now filled. The other way of doing it a little bit more quickly than one by one is I can hold the control button on my keyboard, which is usually the bottom left-hand button, highlight my first shift, and then just keep clicking until they've all got that blue halo around them. Once I've got all 4 highlighted, or however many I need, I can quite literally just drop that into place. I've got the ability to drop it onto the name or onto the actual day itself. So for example, if I drop this onto his name there, because it came from Tuesday, it knows it belongs on Tuesday, so you don't have to worry about that. And if you accidentally dragged a Wednesday, for example, onto a Thursday, it would convert the Wednesday into a Thursday, presuming you had some shifts on a Thursday. I'll show you what I mean here. It won't work in this situation because I have no earlies on Monday. But if I used a Tuesday early and tried to pop it on a Monday, it would tell me I have no vacant duty on that day because we've run out of early shifts on that Monday. Another feature of certain units, and this really does depend on where you're working, is we have the ability to merge an early and a late together. So I can either drag them out together as an early, press Control, and a late. So I've just pressed Control to highlight both. I'm going to drag both to one person, and that will convert the early and late into a long day, L-D. And if I hover over that now, that will now be an 8 till 8:30 shift, which is how this shift is configured for this particular unit. Of course, your long day will be whatever you do. The other way of doing it is if you've already got an early, I can literally drag a late onto the top of it. Let's pick that one. And that will convert that late into a long day. When I give it back, so what I mean by give it back is if I dragged this shift off the roster, which I can do, it will return those shifts individually back to vacant duties at the top here. So again, if I give an early back here, on the Monday, we'll now have an early available to us to roster to someone else. So there is a way of manually and bulk assigning shifts to staff just by clicking and holding Control. Alternatively, we can just drag and drop them on and off for that matter. But the way that we prefer you to use the system is by using an auto roster. Now the auto roster is exactly what it suggests. It's an automatic building of your roster. However, it does require it to be configured. So do double check with your department or the rostering team just to make sure that you have an auto roster set up that works. However, should you have that, it's as easy as clicking this purple bar that spans along the top. We don't need the shifts anymore. We can click show vacancies and hide that. Click the purple bar at the top and then just right click and auto roster. Now the right options will be already selected, but it's just to let you know is complete always first. If we picked fill in days off, it'll do exactly that. It'll fill every empty shift or space with a day off, so we don't want to give someone 4 weeks worth of days off. So complete and then press OK. Now what happens is the purple bar will now change yellow just to indicate the fact that it's doing something. The auto roster is running behind the scenes. If you were to just keep refreshing, I wouldn't recommend this, and you don't need to do it at all, but if you were to keep refreshing, you could see the progress of the auto roster, and we can see that the auto roster is slowly filling all the available shifts. Based on the rules and stipulations that we've given it and configured it to do, it will build you a 4-week roster for that period in question. I'm just going to pause and let it complete, and I'll show you the output of what it gives us. I now know it's complete because the purple bar has now returned from yellow, and if we hover over it, it does actually state that the auto roster info is now completed. And it's done as much as it's able to do. It won't make complex decisions for you. So if it's unable to find a valid person for a shift, it won't issue the shift, it won't force it out. That's why some people don't have enough shifts or no shifts at all, because it may be that the rules are stipulated that, for example here, our deputy ward managers shouldn't be auto-rostered because we need to manually roster those in. And that's why not one of them has a shift over this 2-week period or 4-week period if we look over 4 weeks. And we could just finish off the auto roster with a little bit of manual rostering. So again, if I go back up to show vacancies, this will show me how many shifts I've got left. In this case, it's prioritised the day shifts first. In your unit, if you do work nights, it'll do the opposite usually. And we could just fill in the gaps by dragging them out. You may find that a bit of manual cajoling may be required. So, for example, to fit all your nights in, you may need to reassign some days, but that's quite normal. The auto roster will, generally speaking, unless you've got a very, very good one, the target we aim for is around 70 to 80% complete. So it'll build for you and do all the legwork for about 70 to 80% of your roster. The rest will be finished off by hand. That's quite usual and what we'd expect as well. You'll notice that with our shifts, we've got all kinds of different colours. So first and foremost, we have our empty shifts at the top, which are always red. I'm just going to remove those from the equation at the moment. When we've actually issued a shift, we have kind of an extended traffic light system, if you'd like. So a green shift on the roster represents a good shift, nothing wrong with it, and it's absolutely fine to go ahead. Should you want to get more information about that shift, as with anything in the system, you can hover over it and it will tell you the information about that. So on the 28th of the 10th, we can see that the start time is 8, the finish time is 4, and the work time is 7.5 hours with a 30-minute break. Ignore the rest start, which says 11:45 there. It doesn't mean that you have to have your rest then, it just picks the middle of the shift. Our next colour is orange. Now, orange is still fine, it's still an active shift. There's nothing really wrong with it, but it's gone orange because it wants to tell you something about that shift. So it has a warning of some sort. So, for example, in this situation, we have a late here on the 26th of the 10th, starting at 2 till 10 for 7.5 hours and 30 minutes rest. But the warning just beneath that information says Global Required Skills Rule. So on a particular late, or on all lates more than likely in this unit, it says the person does not have the required skill, CPR, for this late. So the shift has a requirement of at least one person on that late, on that day, needs to have a CPR skill in the system. It's not uncommon for units to have skill requirements, but most don't have skill requirements. So usually what you'd see in the warnings instead is something like their NMC PIN number has expired on the system. Now, of course, it doesn't mean their PIN has actually expired, it just means the system isn't up to date, but it's things like that that would be highlighted in the system for you. Now, in the case of the NMC PIN, because we presume the system is incorrect, rather than that person has actually expired in terms of their registration, it doesn't stop you issuing the shift, because of course we still need to be able to roster that person even if the information in the system is a little bit behind. Now, the NMC PIN numbers, for example, are uploaded by the e-rostering team. It's not something that you have to do, but you certainly can if you want to. So that's something we should deal with for you. So just proceed as normal, even though that shift is orange. It's perfectly fine to go ahead. If we hover over another one, it's exactly the same reason for this one here. So a global required skills rule, because it's a long day, so it covers both an early and a late. We've got a person does not have the required skill, CPR for early, and of course for the late as well. So there isn't a person on that unit on that day that has the CPR skill. Obviously, if you were the ward manager of that area, you would probably address that and issue that shift to someone else perhaps that does have the skill. Or it may be that they do have the skill but it's not shown in the system. So you just get in touch with the e-rostering team and we can help you show that. Our other colours are red, which you will probably never see on the roster, hopefully. You certainly wouldn't see it as a result of the auto roster because red only indicates one thing. If we exclude the vacancies for a moment, red on the roster only indicates a working time directive breach. And of course, we can't plan to breach the working time directive, so the auto roster isn't allowed to plan those shifts, nor are you. It wouldn't physically let you put a shift in that breached the working time directive. But of course, retrospectively, if that happened after the fact, so if we were showing it after the person has already worked, we need to show them as working, of course. So you would contact the e-rostering team, and we would help you show that working time directive breach, and the shift would go red. Our extended traffic light continues to purple. Purple indicates a shift that would have been but never went ahead. It's a cancelled shift. So if we hover over a purple shift, it shows you for audit reasons that we intended for that person to be in, but for whatever reason, it could be a multitude of reasons, that shift couldn't go ahead. In this case, it says unachievable pattern duty. So this person had a pattern and it couldn't achieve that pattern, probably because it ran out of day shifts. So we only have a set number of shifts per day, of course, because you only have a set requirement. This person's pattern conflicted with the number of shifts that we got. We don't have enough shifts available, so they can't have that pattern. So it shows you what they should have done. And of course, we could pinch that shift from someone else. For example, this chap here, perhaps he wasn't scheduled to be in on that Friday. We could just pop it into place, just swap it from one person to another, and actually that person now has a cancelled shift to state that he couldn't do it in the first place, but I've now manually put one there. These are supposed to stay there, but they'll always go underneath an active shift or an active, what we refer to as unavailability, something like a sickness and so on and so forth. Which brings me nicely onto our next colour, which is this kind of beige colour here, which represents any time that we class as unavailable time, so time that they're not on the unit. And this could range from anything from annual leave, sickness, it could be maternity leave, it could be an office day, but this is something we would manually put on the roster with everything other than leave, of course, because staff would request their own leave. And again, it would show an extended period of time, anything from one day, just like the shifts are, to this one here, which is actually a week's worth of study leave. So it's one continuous block of study leave. And if I hover over it, it tells me exactly the information that I need to know about that one. So it says other study leave. There could be a more appropriate reason. Other is the one that has been chosen in this case. The work time that it covers, which is 37.5 hours, because it covers their full working week. And the fact that it's approved under state. Unavailability also goes purple when it's cancelled. In the other module, we actually rejected an annual leave request using the unit summary, and this is the result of that rejection. So, again, the annual leave request spans the whole week, but it is now that kind of lilac purple colour to state that this is what they wanted, but unfortunately we couldn't accommodate it. So, again, there's a footprint, but not active. And then the one underneath, which is an active leave, it's that beige colour again. Again, I hover over it and it says annual leave. Work time 22.5 hours, as it only covers 3 days that week. And the state is approved, which is why it's beige and not purple, or any other colour for that matter. Purple shifts, as I've mentioned, can overlap. Purple leaves can also overlap with other shifts as well. So if I was to drag this shift to this person's line, the shift is shown as orange because it wants to tell us something about the shift, but it's still active and ready to go. It's still fine to go ahead, just the leave is a reflection of what they wanted that couldn't be accommodated. And that's our traffic light system in terms of shifts. So that's how to build a roster manually and also using auto roster. Auto roster was using the purple bar, and then manually was using show vacant shifts at the top and just literally dragging them into place.